And we're live. We're back on Survivor Global. And with me today, I've got Adam Jumba. We're going to be talking here about Survivor Island of Secrets, South African version, obviously. And we're going to be covering episodes 7 and 8. Now, before we get into it, I do want to say, we want to thank everybody that have been watching this podcast, and not just this one, but all of the other reality pop podcasts over the last 2 months since we've started. We didn't expect to hit over 500 subscribers as quickly as we did, so we want to thank everybody that has subscribed, definitely. We are thinking and brainstorming in regards to what we would be doing if we hit 1,000 subscribers on this channel, because we think that would be quite a significant milestone, and we do have a couple of ideas. Now, I have noticed that there's about 70% of you that watch some of these videos for International Survivor that aren't subscribed to the channel, and obviously it is your choice if you want to subscribe or not, but we hope that we earn your subscription today, and we just want to add that if you do subscribe to the channel, it definitely gives us more credibility, and we can bring in better and better people, and we can continue to improve this podcast, which is what the aim is for myself and Adam. Now, Adam, I'm going to go over to you. How are you doing?
I'm doing great, man. Excited to be on. This will be my first one covering a South African season, so I'm excited. Yeah, let's get it going.
Yeah, now I did want to sort of ask you, what have you thought about the Survivor South Africa season to date? Because, obviously it is quite well known that when you watched the Australian Survivor, that was the first time ever that you've watched any international version of the show. Now, Survivor South Africa is quite different in a lot of ways to the Australian version, obviously, but what has your thoughts been about the show and even the host up until this point?
Yeah, South African feels a little bit closer in format and in editing to American Survivor, whereas Australia kind of seemed like they took a lot of risks and went different routes in a lot. I mean, the core is there, obviously, but yeah, I like it. I feel like there's, as I was watching, I was like, there's a lot more trust, I think. It kind of feels more like an old school Survivor in the sense that that survival aspect is a lot more prominent, whereas now in U.S. Survivor, it's pretty much totally gone. It seems like people trust each other a bit more. There's not as much sneaky mastermind, strategic, the Yule and Cook Islands, the Russell and Samoa, the Parvati and Heroes and Villains. There's not really any of that yet. I'm only 8 episodes in, so I don't know if that happens yet, but it seems a little bit more similar to US, specifically old school US, and a lot of great social players, which nowadays it's all strategic. A lot of great social players. Not to say that there's no strategy being played. It's just, it seems that the social game and the survival aspect and the tribe part of it, everyone's doing what's best for the tribe. They're like, let's keep the tribe strong. Let's keep whereas nowadays in US Survivor, it's like, screw the tribe. It's me. So everyone's thinking about the individual game from day one. So it's interesting that this season, I'm not sure how it's like for other South African seasons, but one of the biggest things I've noticed is just the importance and the value these guys are putting on their tribes and their alliances. I feel like a lot of these alliances are withstanding things that most U.S. alliances crumple at the first sight of. So some similarities, some differences. So I'm interested to see how the rest of it plays out, because we haven't even gotten to the merge yet.
Yeah, well, it's interesting you mentioned that, because we look at this season and they brought a lot of new school Survivor game mechanics to the show. Like, there's idols floating around. There's the Island of Secrets, for instance, with different advantages and choices being given on the island.
Mm-hmm.
But even with all of these game mechanics, the players within it plays it very differently in regards to actually using those game mechanics as of yet. So it's quite interesting to see how they're coping with it versus what potentially US Survivor players would have done with those same twists in the game.
Right. Yeah. It kind of reminds me of Ghost Island a little bit, like the Island of Secrets. If I had to compare it to one, it sort of reminds me of Ghost Island, where it's a lot of it's up to chance. It's like you might win the reward, you might not. Sometimes there's nothing there. Sometimes it's a big thing. Sometimes it's just like something that lasts for a day or two, or a vote or two. So it's interesting. It seems like they brought a lot of aspects from different seasons into this one. So while still making it not seem like super complex and over the top. So I'm impressed with how they formatted the season for sure.
Yeah, now it's no secret that Leroux Buerta, who's one of the producers for the show, and Nico himself, they're both very, very big Survivor fans, and they've watched every single season in the US. So I'm pretty
Okay.
sure they would have taken some of the US, aspects of what was used in certain seasons. They would have brought it in. And I listened to a
Mhm.
podcast not that long ago where Leroux Buerta, I believe he was talking to Shannon Gates or Gus about the twist of the Redemption or Exile Island type of thing, and if that would ever come into the show over here in or on South African seasons. And they didn't seem too keen on that, but he said he always watches them. He liked the tokens, so I wonder if the fire tokens at some stage will make an appearance in Survivor South Africa. Now, moving on to the actual episode here, we very early on, I think the most interesting thing is we have Lomé, Sola, and Talo all receiving tree mail. And tree mail is something, again, we don't really see. I don't even think we saw it in the Australian Survivor from memory all that often, but they show us them reading the tree mail and speculating that it could be a merge or it could be a tribe swap. And I think the most interesting thing that sort of comes to play here in the early stages of this episode is in the Ta'alo tribe, where Nicole is saying, oh, no, I didn't even have the opportunity to go and look for the idol because she made this whole lie about having half an idol and then another idol she's got to go look for on her beach. And
Mhm.
Meryl very cleverly says, no, girl, you've got to make time. You've got to go find the idol. The idol is your lifeline in the game. And you see Meryl and Dante here sort of thick as thieves, having a bit of a laugh because they are pretty convinced that Nicole already has the idol. The lie didn't work on them. And they're sort of saying, like, if that was them, they would have been looking. But Nicole does give like a very lackluster attempt here to try and go look for the idol on the beach.
Yeah, it's interesting. I know we're trying to keep it to specifically episodes 7 and 8, but it's interesting kind of in the comparison to US, because I feel like in the US everyone would have fallen for that. I mean, Rob fell for it and he was the closest with Nicole. He's the one who's supposed to know her the best, and it seemed like he fell for it. Maybe he's just a bit more vulnerable, so the when he sees emotion he kind of doesn't take it for granted. But I feel like in the U.S., that would have been so. She did such a great performance. It was so interesting that Dante was able to crack the code. But no, it seems like even after the tribe swap, it seems like that group of Nathan, Nicole, and Rob and Sipe, even though they've kind of and Steffi as well, even though they've kind of split up, it seems like they're able to look out. They found great ways to look out for each other while not being on the same tribe, which is something that we just don't see in the U.S. It's like you can hope that when that you go back, that alliance is still going to be there, but once the tribe swap happens, it almost seems like it's just forget them. I'm with these people now. So it's
Yeah.
interesting.
I want to touch on that just a little bit. With South Africa, one of the things about South Africans, and this is a cultural thing, I think why they didn't trust her so much here, is that in South Africa, there's a lot of crime. There's a lot of people that, will try and get one on over you. So there's a lot of corruption and things all the way up until government, where people in general just, I don't think, are that trustworthy as easily. So they won't take someone at face value that easily within the country because it is a survival mechanism. And I think that we see that come into play quite a lot here, where some people might look at Dante, which we'll definitely go into later on in the episode, as being quite extreme. But, if you're in a survival situation in your daily life and you have to also be put into that survival situation in Survivor, I think that fight or flight instincts sometimes kicks in on the island even more so. So I do think it's a bit cultural maybe in that sense, why it didn't work. But I also think that Dante is pretty switched on because he's got some good reads. I just don't know if he's really good at delivering it later on within the episode and how he goes about it. But I also think that he was at a disadvantage, which we'll definitely talk about going into that specific tribe swap. Now,
Mhm.
we do see the tribe swap happening. And with the tribe swap here, they've got quite an interesting sort of way that they do that. It's these big paint buckets that are closed, and they have to walk up to it, put their hand in it, and find out what tribe they're going to. We find out that pretty much everybody gets a tribe except for Steffi. She gets Clearwater, and she's really stressed about it at this time, but it basically means that she's going to have to go to the Island of Secrets. The biggest thing probably that stands out here is that, we've got the Misfits being split up. So you've got Jark and Sipe going to one tribe, and Doral now is going to land on his own on his tribe.
Mhm. Yeah, it's interesting with Sipe to touch on her for a moment because when she was on the original tribe, which I'm not even going to try to attempt at remembering or how to say the
Yeah,
names of, but her original tribe, it seemed like she was kind of, even after Leanne and Paul got voted out, it seemed like she was so clearly on the bottom, but that she kind of worked her way in with the other amigos. Yeah, it was interesting. It seemed like she was clearly on the bottom of like what was at the time like the most powerful alliance across any tribe, but then kind of established herself pretty firmly with the rest of them. And now she's also a part of this Misfits, which I guess you could consider like the second strongest, just based on like the people that are there as well as like the tools that they have with Jacques' advantages, idols. So it's interesting. See, after Leanne and Paul left, it seemed like she was kind of had the absolute least power. Now Sipe's kind of put herself in a position where she's actually, I think, one of the most powerful players in the game. So it's interesting to see her work her way up in such a short time.
no, 100%. I think that it is a very interesting dynamic with Sipe, and you kind of put it very well there. I thought she was in the bottom as well, even though later on we hear from Rob and Mike, or Rob telling Mike that Steffi was at the bottom, which I never saw at
Yeah,
all in that first
100%.
one. And I don't know if he's maybe just throwing Mike off the scent here to sort of try and build that relationship with Mike. But Doral here is for me going to be the very interesting one, having to fend for himself and going to a tribe where he doesn't have any previous relationships, and he's going to be the only one from that tribe in there and become a little bit of a swing person in the middle. I do want to touch, just before we go into that tribe dynamic there, I want to touch on the reward challenge itself. The reward challenge, they get to fight for everything that Lau Mei had won up until that point, and also some extra food. And I thought it was a really clever mechanic, or a really clever thing by production here, not to really throw anything. It cuts cost because they can reuse the same reward twice and just give that
Right.
to someone else. So I thought really well done by production.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. They've done a good job at making the reward challenges count, and matter and seem important of this season. I know in the good old days in U.S. Survivor, the rewards to some people was the most exciting part of the episode. It was seeing them get to fly away to a you know hang out with local people and whatever land they're in, or spend a day at the
Mm.
spa, and you could tell the advantage of winning the award, and how it could possibly lead to winning the immunity the next day. Nowadays, they don't even show half the reward challenges. They don't even make it to TV because all we see is what's going on in the shelter with all the strategizing. So this season, I don't know. I can't speak on the other South African seasons, but because I haven't watched them. But this season, it seems like they've definitely found a way to make the reward challenges feel important, and that they matter. So cheers to them.
And I always like it when they bring in the reward challenges, they bring in survival kits and like things like a
Yeah.
tarp, like fishing gear, things that, if you want to go get food, go hunt, go out there and go spearfish, and things like that. And someone like a Dante is shown to have some of the skills there early in the season
Mhm.
to go out there and catch fish for them and things like that. So I do like the rewards as well. I think the other really big thing that stands out for me in this reward challenge is at the end of it, Ta'alo wins, which is Rob's tribe, and he goes
Mhm.
over to Nathan. So we've seen Rob and Nathan continue to have that bromance, be very, very close throughout the season. I mean, he was literally happy to carry him on his back until the end if he had to. And he
Mhm.
goes over to Nathan and he says, "Get rid of Dante." So that was his last message. And I feel like this is the reason I said Dante, for me, no matter what he was going to do with Nathan to try and build that bond through these last couple of episodes, Nathan and Rob are both as thick as thieves, and he was never really going to trust Dante because of that one little conversation. And then obviously Nicole is also now landing on that same tribe as Nathan as well. So she will obviously also have that thing against Dante and Meryl, who've been putting pressure on her in the previous tribe. Because I think that that's the most vulnerable both Nicole and Rob has been in the whole game, was in that tribe.
Yeah, I think the biggest takeaway from it is just how great of a game Rob is playing up until this point. I think he's up until this point, at least, I think he's probably playing the best game. I mean, the way that he's been able to just make everyone in his core alliance trust him to a T, to the point where when he says vote out Dante, it doesn't come across as like a Boston Rob going and saying it as kind of like putting a hit on someone, or like a boss saying, do this, follow my orders. It doesn't seem like that at all when Rob says vote out Dante. It's when he goes to Nathan and says that, it feels like a friend coming to a friend saying, hey, if we let Dante get to the merge, I feel like it's going to hurt us, and it's going to hurt your chances. It's going to hurt our chance, my chance. It's going to hurt our alliance chance. So I think it's better to vote him out now, to look out for yourself. All of that packed into just him saying, you got to vote out Dante, because that's the relationship that Rob was able to establish with Nathan. So it's just a testament to how well of a whole. And I feel like, honestly, if he would have said the same thing to Steph, I know some of these people are on his tribe, but if he would have said the same thing to Steffi, Nicole, or Sipe, I feel like the same effect would probably have happened. So it just goes to show how great of a relationship he's been able to build with his core alliance in such a short time.
No, 100%. Now, we do go to the Island of Secrets here, and Steffi goes to the Island of Secrets, and she finds out that she will not have to go to the next tribal council as a tribe member. She can go there and actually witness, so firstly get information at that tribal council, the tribal council itself, but then afterwards, she will be joining whoever goes, whoever leaves the specific tribe, she will go in their place and join that tribe. So I feel like it's a pretty big advantage for her here to not have to worry about, firstly, being someone that can get voted out, and then secondly, she gets a little bit of information before she hits that tribe, and she can hit the sort of tribe running. She also says here, which is quite interesting to me, is that she's happy that the game will decide for her where she goes. She didn't want to make that decision herself, because obviously she's got 2 alliance members in both tribes here. She's got Nicole and Nathan in the one tribe, and she's got Sipe and Rob in the other tribe.
Yeah, we've we saw a similar thing with Tanya earlier, and this is nothing new. We've seen this on U.S. Survivor a couple times, where like one person doesn't get on a tribe and has to go to the joint tribe. It's kind of a bittersweet thing, because it's good. The big pro of that is you have no chance of going home that day, so you make it at least to the next tribal. But at the same time, it means that's an entire day where you're not there building bonds, you're not there creating relationships, or working on either repairing bad ones or adding on to already good ones. You don't have a voice in the vote. You might feel missed out. So it does have some negative too. Obviously, Steffi saw it as more as a positive. So she obviously has a better understanding of what's going out there than we do from watching it at home. So she saw it as more of a positive thing. So, we'll roll with her on that. But she obviously gets to join the tribe.
Yeah. I was going to say the one positive thing here is that at least she has to explain to them at the next immunity challenge what's happening. They know that it's part of the Island of Secrets, that this is her advantage this round. She gets to sit out one, and she gets to join another tribe. I feel like with the game forcing her to explain that in front of Nico, it gives her credibility that this is the only thing that she received at the Island of Secrets. Because the other big thing that we don't always talk about is that if someone goes to the Island of Secrets, it is expected that that person's going to go get something there. And if you come back with a really flaky story, exactly, you've got a target on your back. So I feel like in that sense, it probably helps her a little bit that she has to go and explain exactly what's happening to her at this stage in the game. Now, I want to touch on the new Solar tribe. Now, with this new Solar tribe, Durrell is here on his own. He immediately goes over to talk to Nicole about, I heard you're a great person. Sipe has only said great things about you. So he uses that Sipe connection that he's built within the Misfits. And he has Meryl walking up there at the same time. And he talks to Meryl about her guy Felix. And he says, I'm sorry that I had to blindside your guy Felix. I had to show him one. And he kind of, it's really funny because he doesn't come across as threatening, but I just feel like saying to someone that I blindsided your alliance member in front of them isn't the greatest of gameplay. And Meryl does start looking at Durrell as a potential threat here, because she says he's pulled off the first really big blindside in the game.
Yeah, and unless I missed something, I didn't really feel in the moment that it was Darrell leading the charge
No.
for that blind side anyway. So it would be one thing if he said it and then had a couple people there to back him up and say, "Yeah, you did that," but he kind of didn't have that. So it's interesting. It's especially interesting because Darrell was almost invisible for the first couple episodes. So it is interesting to see him kind of come out of his shell and become taking credit for these big moves, which, normally you don't take credit for big moves until the end because the more people really, whether you did the move or not, the more attention you bring to your resume. At the end of the day, you want a resume, but you don't want people to realize your resume until the end. So if he's
Yeah.
announcing what's on his, here, look what I did now. I don't know if that is a smart move for the future. But I do think coming to Nicole was the right move because I do think in the short and long term she would probably have been the best person that was there on the tribe to go to because she does hold a lot of power in the game and has a lot of great bond. She feels right up there with Rob. Like if I could pick two that I think are playing the best game up until this point, I think it's got to be Nicole and Rob. So I think he did make a good choice of who to approach. Maybe just needed to tweak what exactly he said during that approach.
Yeah, I think it definitely resonated with Nicole. I just feel like Meryl is the one that probably could have taken a bit of offense by the fact that he blindsided her previous alliance member. But, we also see in
Mhm.
this stage here Nathan cutting coconut with a knife, but doing it in a way where he ends up cutting himself and hurting his own hand. So Nathan just can't, stay injury free this whole game. And he's got Nicole running over there looking after him immediately as soon as it happens. And Jeffrey's saying that he's super annoyed by Nathan because, Nathan's almost like a bit of a drama queen, someone that needs a lot of attention within the tribe, which is sad because,
Mhm.
like, I've got that. I feel like Nathan could be a good player, but he keeps
Yeah.
doing some of these things to himself that kind of self sabotages.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. I think he needs, if there's one area I think Nathan needs the most improvement on, it's just awareness because I do think he's a smart player. I do think that if he wasn't so injury prone, I don't know if he'd be a challenge, beast, but I do think he would have done a lot better in the challenges had he not had the two or three injuries that he had. I just feel like if he had a little lesson on awareness in the game, I think that's he's right up there in the alliance with Rob and Nicole, but he doesn't feel as powerful or as established as they are because I just feel like he lacks a little bit of awareness of how people are viewing him or how his injuries are affecting that. So I don't think he's at the bottom by any means. At least I didn't at this point. But I do. Yeah, I agree with you. I do think that there's a good player in there somewhere.
Mm. Now, we also see here that, Dante is starting to plant seeds with Mubba in regards to Nicole having an idol. He's really trying to create that divide between Jeff, Mubba, and Nicole and Nathan potentially here. And obviously, this is going to continue to escalate into the next episode. So let's talk a little bit more about that in the next episode. But some of the early work is being done in this episode. Now, for the Ta'alo side, it is really interesting because everybody in camp, they're agreeing that the Flint needs to stay in the middle of the camp now because they've lost it a few times. And we see a lot of talk about just general camp equipment and how they have to manage it, housekeeping and all those kind of things. All of that makes the TV show for Survivor South Africa, which probably doesn't make it so much on the US seasons of the show anymore. We also have Rocco, and this is probably the most interesting conversation here. Rocco sitting in the camp with all the new members, or quite a few of the new members, and he specifically starts laying out the current play or the current situation within the game, saying that Rob and Nicole are right at the top. They've got an alliance with Steffi. Nicole and Steffi is very close. Rob and Nathan is very close. And Sipe sits within this group while he's having this conversation. And he says, Sipe, you're kind of in that group as well. You're getting tied in there as well. So you've got to be careful. And he says that he's doing this on purpose to let people know what the current power structure is within the game and who the potential strongest alliance is within the game so that the game can get blown open. He doesn't want someone that's already in a power position to win the game, which I think is all great and well to put it out that way, but potentially having Sipe in that group with Jark, who's very close to Sipe.
Mhm.
I don't know if he's got that many allies around him at this point that is willing to listen to him, even though his read is correct.
Yeah, and the thing is, he's absolutely right with what he says. I mean, he doesn't really say anything wrong. It's just he also didn't seem to have that sense of urgency in his pitch to everyone. It seemed like more of just like um, a news anchor giving an update on the events, as far as like a guy saying, "Hey, you guys got to watch out." Like this is that sense of urgency seemed to lack, and I feel like that happens a lot with Rocco. He's a very calm, laid back. He's got a very soft voice for
Mm.
someone as big a size as he is. So I think when he says things, that sense of urgency, or that need for attention to be drawn just isn't there. Even though what he says is absolutely true, that Rob and Nicole definitely are kind of at the top, and that Sipe is kind of right there with them. So I think he has a great awareness. You know, it's kind of the opposite of Nathan. Like, I think Rocco has a great awareness of the game. I just think he needs better ways of utilizing that.
100%. Now, a very interesting scene happens here with Sipe sitting in the camp at nighttime with all of them, where she starts calling out some of the more physical players in the game that have not seen a tribal council yet. And she says that, these guys aren't playing the game, and that it's time for them to start playing the game. And Mike obviously takes massive offense to it because he's one of those players that have not seen a tribal council as of yet. What did you think of Sipe's approach here?
Yeah, it didn't. It kind of reminded me of something that like Debbie Warner would do. Maybe it kind of seemed a bit out there. It seemed like there was really. I don't think she had like poor intentions or was doing anything wrong or hurtful. It also kind of I'm wondering if some people compared it to Sierra in Cambodia, where she kind of gathered the tribe as well on multiple occasions and kind of said, play the game, light a fire under yourself, like you gotta get in there. But it's now or never. But that was out of desperation. That was her. She was at the bottom of the tribe of the merged tribe, and she was trying to use it as a way to cause people to want to potentially use her, Wentworth and Abby as and Cass at the beginning there too, to use them so that they could work their way up. So it was more of a move. It didn't work out for her ultimately, but CP's felt a little different. It didn't feel like it was motivated by anything. I think CP just doesn't have much of a filter when it comes to some of the things she says. I don't think she's gone too over the top yet. We'll have to wait and see. I don't think she's has any poor intentions. Like, I definitely like Sipe. She kind of feels like a motherly figure, which is, I think, a lot of these things she said. A tribe comes from that motherly. And I'm not sure how old she is, but I think there's a lot of young people on this tribe, so I think she kind of sees them a bit as her kids, and I think she's well intentioned. I just don't know if it was a good move. I think she maybe needs a little bit more of a filter if she wants to make it further.
Yeah, now this gives Mike the opportunity to bond a little bit here with Rob, and he has a conversation with Rob, and he says, "What did you think of the CPay conversation?" And Rob says, "Obviously, I'm a little bit worried by it because I'm one of the more physical players."
Mm-hmm.
But they start bonding, and Mike says he was close to Nathan in the previous tribe, which we never really saw. We never saw Nathan and him being close. In fact, we saw Nathan wanting to snipe Jeff a few times. Maybe it is because he wanted to pull Mike in because Mike and Jeff was pretty close.
Mm-hmm.
One of the things that also starts coming out here is the conversation around idols. And Mike says, obviously Nathan and Steffi told us that there was an idol. Someone took the idol. We don't know who ended up with it. Rob's very surprised by that because this is new information for him. He probably hoped that Steffi and Nathan wouldn't talk about the idol, and he's lied about it. He said that Paul was voted out with it. So he's kind of getting caught out here a little bit in a lie and what he's told up until this point. This leads into a whole segment here of them talking about who's got what idol, and no one knows who's got the LeMay idol. They know that Meryl's got an idol, they know that Rob's got an idol, and it's got a brilliant little scene of Jark here saying, he goes and hides the idol, and he says that now is the time for me to go undercover for a little bit and not be too vocal, because Jark has been playing the game like a US Survivor player would play the game in a South African game up until this point,
Yeah.
and he realizes that he needs to slow his pace.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, Jock kind of feels. I can't remember if you had made this comparison before, but he kind of feels a little bit like an Adam, where he always feels a little bit on edge, a little bit scrambling. But in doing so, kind of puts himself in situations where he can kind of be like a vote that everyone wants to have on their numbers, and finds idols. So sometimes being paranoid and scrambling and kind of being all over the place can lead to good things. It has for Jacques so far. Really, the only negative to Jacques' game was his completely failed idol play. And it seems like he's made a full recovery pretty quickly from that point. So, but it is interesting to hear the idols. The idol play again. Besides Jacques' misplay, even though there's been plenty of idols shown, we haven't really seen, a big idol play or that much idol talk thus far. So it's cool that it's finally coming out.
Stay tuned for the merch, Adam. It's all I can say. So obviously, I've watched it before. Adam hasn't, so I know what's to come in the future. But we also see here with the immunity challenge, Steffi walks up. She's got the cane in hand. I did talk to Tanya, who also came back from the Island of Secrets with the cane when she came back, and I said, did production kind of lead you to do that because we had that great moment with Coach back in the day? And Tanya said, no, production doesn't say anything to us. There's absolutely no direction in regards to what we need to do. So I found it really interesting that Steffi also walked up, with a cane in hand, and that becomes a trend this season so far by the looks of it. And she tells everyone that, listen, I'm not going to be a part of this specific challenge, but I will go to the tribal council for the losing tribe and I will join them. So this is a classic one where everybody has to carry sandbags while running around in a circle, and the one team has to catch the other team. And the big thing here, I guess, is that it did look like quite a quick challenge, and Saula wins this immunity. The big thing for me that sort of stood out is that Quibus was leading that one tribe while Dante was leading the other tribe, and Quibus made them walk quite a lot on the sand opposed to walking only in the water. I think that's maybe what the difference was here, but overall, it's a classic challenge, and I love this challenge. I wish they brought it back more often, even in the US.
Yeah. No, I do too. I like this challenge a lot. I feel like it maybe fits reward a little better because I think reward challenges are the more fun ones. This is always a fun challenge. Maybe that's just personal opinion. I kind of like the more fun challenges to be reward, whereas the more serious, intense ones to be towards immunity. So it's interesting that they put this one as immunity because if I remember correctly, in the U.S., it's most of the time, if not always, a reward challenge. But it was cool seeing it. I like when they use challenges. I'm curious how much. This is a different topic, but I'm curious if there's any U.S. challenges that have been inspired from international seasons. But that kind of just popped in my head now. But yeah, I definitely like the challenge. Definitely, I agree. Definitely went by. We were talking about this before the podcast. It went by pretty quick. Which is surprising because when he tells the rules, you're like, oh, this is going to go on for hours, but you never know what's going to happen out there.
Yeah, so off the top of my head, I don't know if there has been any US challenges that have been stolen from the international. I do feel like the international in general, especially Survivor South Africa, steals a lot of the ideas from the US. I think that if there is challenges in the future that the US could steal from an international season, it would be the Australian one, because I do feel like the Australian Survivor franchise innovates a lot more when it comes to their challenges and sort of does something completely different. But I don't know if the US necessarily would want to copy it because it's so physical, some of those challenges, opposed to what they've been doing in recent times. But I also want to move in here to, Steffi saying that the fact that Saula won the immunity and Tahalo lost it here. She didn't really have a preference of where she was going to go, but she does feel like with this specific tribe, they are quite strong and they will win quite a lot of challenges. So obviously they've got someone like a Rocco in there, a Rob in there, who probably two of the more physical people, and they haven't lost many. And Steffi herself is an athlete. So I don't know if you've been impressed with her up until this point, but she, not a lot of people probably knows this because she went in there and people talked about the fact that she was a beauty pageant queen and Miss Namibia and all this kind of stuff. But she's actually an athlete. She's run, I'm pretty sure, pretty at a high level. It might have been like the Commonwealth Games. She's run athletics. And also she's, I think, recently been playing for South African women's rugby, which is a pretty physical sport as well. So she's an athlete. Definitely one of the things I'll ask her when we get on the show, and there's a good chance that we will. She seems quite interested in coming on the show. Is if she would be interested in something like the challenge, because I think that she could do extremely well in that type of game show where it is all about the physical ability of the person.
Yeah, yeah. Ask her. I'll definitely be tuning in.
Yeah. Well, okay, so we have this pre-tribal part here, and Mike says Sipe and Letitia slowed them down. Those were the two people that lost the challenge for them today. But Rob's not going to have any of that. He is going to start going around, and he's going to talk to each person within this tribe to paint a target on Rocco's back, because he now thinks it's the perfect opportunity to get Rocco. He can't get Dante, who's his number one target. And he goes around to talk to pretty much everyone, Sipe, Jark, Mike, and he's very quickly getting momentum because he's selling the whole thing that this is our last opportunity potentially to get someone out that is going to be a physical threat when we go into the merge section of the game. And this might be the last opportunity we have to take him out. Rocco also picks up on this, but slowly, a little bit behind the eight ball, but he goes and tries to talk to those same people to make the exact same case about Rob, but also saying Rob's got social connections. But I feel like Rob's social connections at this stage is winning out over Rocco's sort of argument. Rocco is seeing he is the person who is going around telling everybody, like Rob said on the podcast we had him on. If you haven't seen that, guys, Rob Bentelli is on our international Why You Should Watch International Survivor podcast. He said Rocco was that person running around telling everybody that there's the end of days are coming, and no one is, sort of responding to that at this point.
Yeah, another case of Rocco saying all the right things. Like everything he's saying is absolutely true. And Rocco obviously is a physical threat, but I don't know if Rocco has the social game or the strategic game to actually pull out a win. Unless I don't know if the South African juries really value how well you are at challenges. But unless he goes on a tear and just wins them all, I don't know if Rocco's in enough of a position to potentially win the game. So Rob's pitch to me is doesn't have as much worth to it because I, as a viewer, don't believe him. So the fact that he's able to convince all these people so quickly is, again, I feel like I keep saying it, but it's just a testament to how great of a game he's playing. And Rocco, who actually has way more worth to his words, everything he's saying is absolutely true. Not only is Rob a physical threat, but he also has probably the best social connections. Probably is not only is he in the strongest alliance, he's at the head of the strongest alliance in the game. So it's two people making the exact same, or making the exact same pitch to different people, except Rob is stretching it a lot, and Rocco is absolutely 100% true in everything he's saying. But yet, Rob somehow is able to convince them all to do exactly what he wants. So he's just playing a stellar pre-merge game. Hopefully, it continues to post-merge.
Yeah, I feel like this is the episode where Rob really started flexing his muscle when it came to taking Rocco out, because one of the things that's been really interesting for me about Rob's game up until this point is that he's played a very slow game. You see a lot of people have come into this game, they're running at 100 miles, like your Jarks, your Dantes potentially even. Some of these guys are trying to really push the pace of the game. But Rob came into the sort of sitting back from the start, focusing on building trust with people. Even the way he talks to Mike about, listen, I'm not going to tell you any information about the idol at this stage. But, if I can build trust with you in the future, I will start sharing that information with you eventually. He's got this really slow, almost like I don't know what you would call it, but he does the slow kill on people where he's like slowly invites them in and says, come to me, trust me, work with me. I'm going to be stable. I'm going to be, the person you can trust. I'll look after you. I'll be the big brother, but it's a very interesting style of play. I don't know how well that would work in other survivors, like Australian Survivor, for instance. I don't know how well it would work in that game because everybody plays so frantic and high pace from the start. But it builds strong trust and relationships.
Yeah, well, he's so good at knowing the right thing to say to the right person, because the whole thing of I'll tell you more about the idol as we build trust. I feel like that wouldn't have worked on someone like Sipe. I don't feel like that wouldn't have worked on someone like Dante or Joffrey, people who are a bit older and mature. Mike's 21 or 20 at the time of filming, if I did my research right. So he's not as mature. I think most older people would be like, oh well, then screw you. Then forget it. Mike is like,
Joff
oh
would have
sure,
been.
yeah. Mike took that as like a challenge. He's like, okay, well then now I want to build trust with this guy. So I just not only is Rob saying the right things, but he's saying the right things to the right people.
Yeah, 100%. So Clark Kent gets voted out. Rocco, aka Rocco, gets voted out in this episode. And I do feel like we've pretty much discussed everything Rocco did. I feel like there wasn't much he did wrong. He just didn't have the social connections to keep him in the game. And that's really what it came down to. Rob just beating him to the punch and getting those connections. Now, episode 8, we do go into it, and Dante in the beginning of it says that, there's too many people in this game that are just happy to make the merge. And he's really annoyed by that because he feels like people should play to win the game. You can't help but kind of agree with Dante as someone that loves the game here. Him being frustrated with people just sitting around wanting to make the merge, only focusing, because I feel like the first time I watched this season, I thought Dante was really against the social game. But it's not really the argument he's making in this game. He's saying that you need to have a balance between physical and social, where he believes some people have only got... So Sandra, for instance, would not have been... Dante would not be a Sandra fan.
Yeah, and I agree with what he's saying. I do I mean, I'm enjoying this season for sure, but I do think this season has players who are either like... players that like have a good chance of win, or they're kind of just there. It has a good mix. It's kind of like everyone kind of seems like they're on one end of the spectrum. And the only person who I've really seen make the crossover so far has been maybe Sipe. Kind of started off as someone who kind of seemed like she was just there, that has now kind of become a bit more of a player. So I agree with Dante and what he's saying for sure.
Now, we see here that, again, Dante is going and he's talking to Nathan this time. And he's saying, we've got passengers in this game. They're called Jeff and Mubba. They're not really adding much to camp life. They're not doing great at the challenges. He was annoyed that Jeff sat out in one of the challenges to date. And, he's saying, why are we keeping these guys around? And Nathan immediately goes over to Jeff again and just goes and tells him all of this information, playing, in my opinion, the perfect middleman type of game here. And Nathan says, people aren't going to see him as a threat because he's constantly injured.
It's a very risky game he's playing. If it works out, it's going to get him very far. But being the guy who supplies all the information can also put you in a tough mood, kind of a tough place. It kind of reminds me of Donathan from Survivor Ghost Island. Kind of also put himself in the position of being the one that was always telling everyone what was going on, and it got him a little far, but eventually it made people get really mad, and it caused a lot of clashes. Sometimes right in front of him, people would yell, and he would kind of just clamor up and didn't know how to respond. So it hurt him in the long run, and it's a very risky position to play. So Nathan's really gotta watch out if he's going to keep doing this.
100%. Now, the more interesting part of this early episode here is Steffi finally joining the Ta'alo tribe. And Steffi immediately has a conversation with Rob by the water well. And she downloads everything about Nathan, saying Nathan's been struggling these last couple of days. He's mentally not there. We also know that, and this is a little bit of insight I could give you in case you didn't listen to the Paul Smolders interview that we had in the beginning of the season with the recaps. Nathan had some stuff going on at home. He didn't disclose what it was. We don't want to know what was happening at home, but there were some other things on his mind that potentially made him struggle and quite vulnerable out on the island out there. So Steffi says, she's struggling and she doesn't know about that boy. Rob immediately says, to him, that's a little bit of a warning sign because his two people in this game is Nathan and Nicole. He doesn't trust anyone like he trusts Nathan and Nicole. And he also is annoyed by Steffi and the pace that she's coming up to him, talking about game and strategy immediately, instead of trying to build those meaningful relationships and that bonds, rebuilding that bond with him. So one of the things that really stands out for me with Rob as a game player, and this is where the similarity between Boston Rob and Rob was made when the actual season was playing live, is that Rob likes to control the pace of the game and the people that is within his alliance. He wants to have full control over someone and the pace that they're moving at. Even though Steffi is making some great arguments here when it comes to targeting Mike, because Mike and Jeff is quite close, Rob doesn't feel like the conversation should go that direction, and he feels like Steffi might be hard to control later in the game.
Yeah, what's interesting too to kind of compare Steffi and Nathan is that they're in positions of power. So this fast pace, this kind of somewhat scrambling, being the messenger, playing both sides, it's really unneeded. Like I compare him to Donathan, it made a little more sense with Donathan because it was out of desperation. He was kind of at the bottom. He needed to find some way to work his way up. It didn't end up working in the end because Wendell and Dom and Ghost Island had already established themselves so well, kind of similar to Rob and Nicole a bit here. So it's interesting that Steffi and Nathan are playing as if they're middle ground people or at the bottom when actually they're part of the dominant alliance. So I agree with Rob. I think that Steffi's just playing the game too quick for how great of a position that she is in.
Yeah, and it comes across with her playing that quickly, sort of talking bad about people in her alliance and wanting to cut people left, right, and center. He's probably thinking, when is it going to be me? When is she going to
Yeah,
turn on me? He wants to control that alliance and the people that he's got with her move at his pace together. Now, the other thing also that
yeah.
we see here is Mike coming clean with Rob about the relationship that he had with Steffi in the previous tribe, saying that that was quite contentious at times. And he says having Steffi around brings back memories of that tribe. And you see Steffi, she's a really strong personality in camp, obviously saying, let's do this, put more water in the rice. She's got that boss-like type of mentality. Between me and you, I love people like that. I understand that. I come from South Africa where a lot of people have got that strong personality, but I can see how that could grate on someone like a Mike, who's a bit more reserved and a little bit more calm as well, similar to how Rob is a little bit more calm and reserved as well. Rob also says that, he kind of trusts Mike, and slowly but surely he's giving him a bit more information here about the fact that one of them have an idol. He's bringing him in a little bit more after that
Mhm.
first vote the previous night.
Is there any? I was meaning to ask you this. Is there anyone from this season that grew up close to where you're from in South Africa?
I think that there is a few people that are from the Cape, like Nathan is from Cape Town.
Okay.
Leanne originally is from Cape Town. I've got to have a look and see who else was from that area. But I feel like with South Africa just being not as big of a country as the United States, like you could fit South Africa into one of your states. So, if you've got people from a certain state that's very similar in the way that they act and how they do things, South Africans can kind of be in there as well. But the thing with South Africa is it's called the Rainbow Nation because there are so many different ethnicities. Like people are always shocked when I was in the US and I would travel around the US and I would tell people I'm from South Africa. They would always say, but you're white. Like, how can you be from Africa? Because people just don't realize there's like nearly 9 million white South Africans, like there is in a country that has about 60 million people, and then
Yeah.
you've got black South Africans, but even within the black South Africans, you've got like Rob is half Zulu, half Austrian, but he's got strong Zulu heritage. But then you get Koza and you get all these different tribes within the ethnicity itself. So it's quite a fascinating country. Like I can see similarities within myself and some of the players, but also there are different players that have got a very different cultural upbringing to myself, and they all live in this small little country, if that makes sense. And that's what
Mhm.
makes, I think, Survivor South Africa so interesting, because you've got people that are culturally quite different playing the game, that communicates differently, that does things differently, and I think that makes for an interesting show with all these personalities interacting.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. It feels like this is like if you didn't tell me this was a South African season and you told me to guess the country, I would not have been able to tell because there's so many different types of people. It feels like it's people from all over the world. So it's um, yeah, it's crazy to think that all these people grew up within not too far away from each other in general. If it's that small of a country, so
Yeah. So with this specific episode, we do go into the reward challenge, and it's for pizza and soft drinks. It's quite a physical challenge. We'll probably touch on this one quite quickly. Again, Steffi has a massive showing here, doing really well with the pole wrestle, getting Nicole
yeah,
off the pole, and Letitia helps out there. Letitia is probably the most underrated person sort of that comes in and plays a big part. And then Rob also is massive because he gets both Durrell and Nathan off the pole in his section. And at the end of it, Dante looks super annoyed with the loss, and he is going to go pissed into his camp, and he's going to bitch a bit more about Jeffrey sitting out, having someone like Nathan with stitches participating in the challenge, and that continues to happen throughout the day as the whole Dante versus Jeffrey dynamic within the tribes.
Yeah, pretty mad at Maba too. Remember he was yelling
Yeah.
Maba quite a bit during the challenge. Sipe also had a great showing. She did not so much in the pulling off part, but she was great at not getting pulled, which is I guess half of it. So props to her. But I realize Dante's frustration. I feel like you got to keep that in check a bit more if you want to remain on people's good sides.
Dante reminds me of some of the biggest challenge competitors we've ever had. Some of the male challenge competitors sometimes get super annoyed with their female partners when they have to do challenges and they're holding them back. Not always a good look,
Mm.
but that's happened a few times. Now, on the Island of Secrets, we've
And he
got
yelled at her
Doral.
birthday too.
Sorry.
I said, and he yelled at her on her birthday too.
Oh, yeah, exactly. Yeah, which is not a great thing out there on Survivor. Now,
Yeah.
we do go to the Island of Secrets. We've got Doral being sent there, and he says that his alliance with the Misfits is strong. Obviously, Sipe had a hand in sending him there. He finds out a bit of information, and very smartly is not going to disclose this information to the tribe later on, but it's that the merge will be happening after the next tribal council. And he also receives an idol, which is good for one use only. And immediately, I thought to myself, if he could survive one challenge, he's got what looks like a very legitimate idol in his pocket that he can use as a fake idol. And we already saw him trying to make a fake idol earlier in the game.
Yeah, like I was saying before, it's interesting that Darrell's kind of gone from a bit of invisible to kind of working his way up as a player. Some of the things that led him there aren't really due, are more due to circumstance as opposed to his own doing. But I do think he's in a good position to get far right now, for sure. I don't know if he's in a position to potentially win right now. So I think he's got to make keep the momentum going a bit and not let this be it for him. He needs to keep making moves, keep putting himself in good positions, control the votes a little bit more, try to get some advantages in idle play, which it seems like from what you say is definitely going to be more of a factor come merge. So
100%. Now we go into the immunity challenge, and each tribe has to maneuver a ball balanced on this stick that they've got to go and walk over like a plank, and they've got to go over a seesaw. And then at the end, it's got this big ball table maze, or this big round table maze with a ball inside of it, that someone has to call out for the two people that are controlling the actual maze to pull the rope back and forth. And this is when Nico gave a little bit of sass, like you said pre the show, that Nico, he definitely is someone that takes his role a lot more serious. He's less jokey with the contestants like you would see a Jonathan necessarily, but he does say here, and he gives a little bit of a dig at them, and he says why they've put Nathan, the guy with the sore hand or the injured hand, on this challenge is beyond me, and it was quite funny to see. But ultimately, Nathan really struggles on this challenge, and they end up losing this challenge, which means that Saola is going to have to go to the next tribal council. So suddenly, the whole dynamic between Dante and Jeffrey, you would think the way that the whole episode has been playing up to this point, that's going to play out moving forward. That's where the two targets has been up until this point.
yeah, well, clearly Durrell didn't see Nathan as an ally or someone he wanted to move further with, because I think if he would have released the information that the merge was next, I think there would have been no chance that Nathan would have gone home because, I feel like the main reason they got rid of him was because they were slowing. He was slowing the tribe challenges, but you would probably want to go up against an injured person in the merge for the merge challenges. So I guess that shows where Terrell's mindset was at. But yeah, Nathan, it's unfortunate. I mean, some of the things that put him in this position were of his doing, playing a bit too much, despite being in a pretty powerful position on the amongst the other castaways. But definitely some unfortunate things to happen to him that ultimately would lead to his downfall here.
Now, with the Nathan one, it is, even up until now, having watched this now for the third time, for me personally, it's one of the most confusing moves that Nicole made in the whole game, right? To go against someone that she's seen as a brother. I think that if Nicole goes to the well with Jeffrey and Maba and Doral and says, there is just no way I can vote against them, I think that Jeffrey and Maba would back down, because Maba
Yeah.
in that point has already said, like, we can't afford to burn Nicole at this stage. She's got too much connections within the other tribe if we go to emerge, and if we burn
Right.
her, then that's going to count against us. So I feel like she was definitely in a position. She firstly has an idol on her pocket that she could play on him, and she knows where the votes are going. And then secondly, I really feel like if she pushed back there, things would have gone differently. So for me, help me make sense of this. What do you think Nicole's motivation would have been at this stage to vote him out?
I think it was just I don't maybe I just don't think she had the awareness at this moment of knowing that she was in that position, and I think the audience saw it, but I think she didn't realize how good of a position she was in, that if it would have just said no, Nathan could have stayed. I mean, I think part of it too was she didn't know the merge was coming up,
Mm,
um, and then didn't want to risk losing another challenge, because if they kept Nathan for one more, lost another one, then had to go back, she might have had to vote him out then. So it was like a do it now so we don't have to vote two people out sort of thing. But hey, we have Nicole coming on the show in a couple weeks here, so we'll definitely save that as a question we got to ask her.
yeah, 100%. And we definitely want to know how Rob felt knowing that his brother, Nathan, the person that he was very close with here, he says Nicole and Nathan is his two people. And one of his two people have just turned on the other one, have taken them out. And Rob knows that Nicole's got an idol. He knows that she could have saved him as well at this point in the game. So it's going to be a very interesting merge episode here for Nicole.
Yeah,
And she's gonna have to balance some things out. But I think brilliant play from Durrell. Durrell's the one for me this episode
yeah,
that I take my hat off. I give him whatever reward we can. He's the MVP of the episode for knowing that the merch is there, but also knowing that he's trying to work his way in tighter with the amigos via CPay, getting it to Nicole, removing Nathan as her brother, removing Nathan as the person that is Rob's right-hand person. Opens a spot there for Durrell to kind of worm his way in. And I feel like, a lot of people may have missed that subtle move that he did in this case. And I feel like
yeah.
Durrell is a lot more aware of the game and the landscape of the game than what a lot of people will give him credit, because he gets the dodo music every now and again. He is a funny character. He says things. He sometimes put his foot in his mouth with what he says, but his actions and how he plays up until this point has been pretty sound. Any final thoughts there from your end, Adam, on the episodes?
Yeah. I think Darrell is a little bit soft spoken and a little bit. I don't want to say lackadaisical, because lackadaisical seems to it's often considered like a negative connotation, but um, I think the way he plays doesn't make for good TV. So we don't see as much as his He's a very subtle player, so we don't see a lot of his strategy. And it was the same thing with Pia, but they were able to really give Pia that winner's edit that show a lot of her
Mm,
moves. But she's an actress, so she knows how to talk to people. She knows how to talk to the camera. She knows how to make herself stand out. Darrell, what does he work at, a hotel, or he's like a hotel events planner or something like that? So
yeah.
it hasn't really had the same experience of knowing how to, tell his plans and his standings and his insights to the audience. So I think he's playing a good game. I just don't think we're being exposed to it enough to truly understand it. But I do agree with you that I think he's playing a good, strong, subtle game, especially when you consider how almost non-existent he was for the first couple episodes. So props to him.
No, 100%. Now, Adam, it's been great having you on the show today to talk to us about Survivor South Africa for the very first time. We don't know if we'll have you back on the show, but I'm hoping I can squeeze you in there somewhere before the end of the season. Probably we'll have you in towards the end if we start talking to some of these end players towards the final, but we will talk about that offline. Now, for everybody that's stuck with us up until this point, thank you very much for your support. As I mentioned in the beginning of the show, please hit the subscribe button if we've earned your subscription today. Please click on the notification bell, give us a like. That does help with the YouTube algorithms. We also have Meryl coming up this weekend. She will be on the show to talk about her time on Survivor Island of Secrets, and we've got Jeffrey lined up as well. So our Survivor South African cast for Island of Secrets, there's a lot of players that are willing to come up and talk about the game, and we're very appreciative of that, because it does give us a greater understanding of some of the dynamics and the things that we didn't see on the show, and what sort of happened behind the scenes. Adam, what do you have coming up with the Survivor buffs?
So tomorrow we are doing our third part of our four-part series where we are tier ranking every season of Survivor from Borneo all the way to Winners at War. This is our third part, so we're starting with Nicaragua, and we are going to end with Worlds Apart. So probably not going to be a lot of high-ranking seasons, but I think that's going to make for some pretty interesting talk. So definitely check that out.
Awesome. Guys, it's been great having you on the show. Catch you next time. Bye.